Well, hello everybody, and very nice to welcome you at our talk. So my name is Tigran Arzumanov. I'm from Clinerion. We are a clinical trial services company based in Basel, in Switzerland. So what do we do? The problem that we are trying to solve, and that we originally were formed or created to solve, is clinical trial recruitment. The problem is that it's very hard to match patients with clinical trials. There's a lot of trials going on at any one time, 40,000 at the moment, and around a third of them are not meeting recruitment goals. 50% of them need to be extended in order to meet their guidelines. And around 7%, so 10% of the trials, and that figure is not on here, actually never recruit a single patient. So it's a big problem for hospitals, and they are trying to solve it, and the only way to truly solve it is to leverage data, because hospitals have a lot of data on patients. They keep complete records on patient health, on patient lab information, diagnosis, and so on. And if that information could be used, that could be very helpful for clinical trials. But nobody quite knows how to do it, because there are a lot of challenges as well. And the biggest challenge is patient privacy. So how do you make patient data available without compromising patient's identity? Hospitals' systems are not built for that. They are built to capture information about a patient, and they don't have by default the way to separate patient health information from patient identity. And that's only one part of the problem. Another part of the problem is hospital systems are not built for patient identification. That's not the biggest priority. So they are not built to find the kind of patient that you need within the sea of patients. They are built for individual patient care. And another problem which we are also trying to solve is availability of data for research. So not all research is clinical trials. A lot of the times hospital data can help answer major questions that pharma companies are facing without the need for a clinical trial. So for example, pharma companies very often need to justify the effectiveness of their drug, or they need to justify the price that a payer needs to pay. And the best way to do this is to show that the drug really works and that it saves money from hospital data. But again, if there is no instrument to do this, pharma companies cannot do it. So, and this is what we came up with to make this possible. So the solution that we developed at Clinerion involves integration with hospital databases. So we get information from hospital systems through a process called ETL, extract, transfer, and load. And we create essentially a local copy of hospital information system, only that copy does not contain identifiable patient information. So we use the process that's called pseudonymization, where a patient ID is replaced by a random string of characters that cannot mean anything and cannot be used to identify a patient outside of hospital walls. So essentially, we are creating a puzzle, and one half of this puzzle is held by the hospital, and the other half is held by us. Without access to complete information, records are anonymous. And we use that information to run queries. So we take a clinical trial protocol, which essentially is a combination of inclusion and exclusion criteria. What we would like to see in a patient, what we don't need to see in a patient. And we create a search expression based on that in an interface that's easy to use, that you don't need to have technical expertise to use. And that query is then sent to servers in the hospitals. And the result that comes back is an aggregated report that doesn't have any patient identifying information. It only has aggregate numbers. So our system will tell us that there are, let's say, 50 patients that conform to this protocol in this particular hospital. And after that, we will be able to tell the pharma company that this hospital has these patients. This, however, is only half of the puzzle. So it's so good to find out where the patients are. But the other half of the puzzle is to be able to give the doctors a tool to identify these patients. There have been some solutions before us on the market that were doing just that, trying to identify where the patients are. The problem that you tend to have is that unless you give the doctor the same tool to actually find these patients, it's of no help. I mean, if you are dealing with rare indications, which are rare by virtue of combination of criteria. So if you say that I want a patient that has 30 or 40 traits that are completely unrelated to each other, how is the doctor going to find that patient, even if you tell them that they have indeed such a patient? So our system comes in two interfaces, and one is for us and for the pharma company to search for the patient, and the other one to identify the patient on site. So our system takes the pseudo ID from our server on hospital premises and matches it up with the real ID of the patient. That is done by the hospital without any involvement from us. So that ensures that patient identity is never leaked. And then essentially the trial site, the hospital, start a clinical trial with a ready list of candidates that they can check. The system is still not bulletproof. I mean, it's not possible to automatically identify a patient for a clinical trial with 100% precision, but our system allows to really narrow the field and go from screening thousands of records to screening dozens of records, let's say, to come up with the candidates that are necessary for the trial. And then, apart from giving this tool to find patients for a clinical trial, our system gives ready tool for pharma company to answer the questions that they have. So they can now search our database and see how the patients are distributed, what kind of treatments they are getting, how long is the hospital stay depending on the kind of drug being used, and so on. So they can answer the questions given by regulators in order to advance their drugs on the market. One other advantage that system like this gives is it can find patients really quickly. So if you are dealing with an emergency care setting study where you need to enroll somebody in the study within minutes after they are admitted, a hospital system wouldn't be physically capable of searching through millions of records and finding a patient like that in time. So if you are dealing with surgery and if somebody comes in with a fractured leg, you really need to be very quick about offering that patient a solution, because otherwise they will go into the standard operation and the patient will be lost for that study. So our tool allows to generate an email within minutes of a patient being admitted and alert clinical trial staff that there is a patient and you need to go and talk to the treating physician to make sure that this patient is given a choice to be entered into the clinical trial. So what are the benefits of this kind of system to the hospitals? Well, one major benefit is that this kind of system is free for the hospital. So when we come to a hospital, we'd offer the system at no cost. The system is paid for by pharma companies that use it. However, it gives hospitals very tangible financial benefits. So they are able to increase the number of clinical trials coming in because pharma companies no longer need to ask each hospital whether they have the patients or how many patients they need. They come to us and we direct them to the hospital that has the patients. They also reduce drastically the amount of labor required to identify each patient, and interestingly, they reduced reliance on highly skilled staff to do it. So we have done some interviews with hospitals that use our technology. What we hear from them is that before our system was put in place, they would, clinical trial nurses would have to go and knock on the doctor's door every day and say, we need the patients, give us the patients. And doctors would rely on patients coming in. So when a patient would come in, then they would look at the patient and say, oh, by the way, I have this trial, let me check, does this, does that, yes, maybe you are suitable. What happens now is that instead of relying on doctors actually seeing people, they start the study with the list of candidates that they can screen. And this list of candidates is put there by the system, so you do not need any labor from the hospital to put it together. And what's more, whenever a patient comes in that's suitable for the trial, the system will flag it and email the trial team. So you are not relying anymore on doctor remembering that they have a trial going on. So all of this, as you see, increases the number of trials that hospital is getting. So we saw that in 3 years, the hospitals linked to one particular hospital system in Turkey and Istanbul, where we implemented the system. So a 5-time increase over 3 years in the number of clinical trials coming in. And we see that the numbers of patients identified can go up between 5 and 30 times, depending on the study. So 30 times, of course, is very extreme. That happens when we uncover an error. So if you have an oncology study, which is about skin cancer, and patients are seen by dermatologists, and oncologist does not know they exist. But that happens as well. And that's one of the big advantages of our system, that it sees the data hospital-wide, and it can even out problems which arise because individual doctors do not talk to each other. So this is all I wanted to say today. We are at stand 40. You are very welcome to come to the stand to talk to us, or you are very welcome to ask any questions now, because I have 5 more minutes to answer the questions. Thank you.